Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code ONEFREEPP for a free single card today.
Dan Illman, Mike Beer for Breeders' Cup Prep Recap, taking a look back at the Grade 1 $1 million Pennsylvania Derby. 3-year-olds going 1 1/8 and Seize the Gray, the Preakness winner, back to the winner's circle in the Pennsylvania Derby, utilizing his preferred running style. Let's watch the replay, and Seize the Gray is the Gray, breaking from post position 2, and he broke sharp, unlike the other Gray and expected pace presence, Dragoon Guard.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, though, to point out that they sort of went back to what Seize the Gray does best here, Dan. And his prior start, the Jim Dandy up at Saratoga, I think they tried to rate him a little bit there and sit back off the pace, and it just didn't really work out. They didn't play any games here. This horse broke well from the gate. They went right to the lead. And he's basically loose here around the first turn, Dan, with nobody really applying any pressure.
I was amazed that they didn't apply pressure. Watch Mike Smith on the 9 just step on it, who wants to step on it and go, but this pace is so slow, and just step on it is rank, and he almost pulled Mike out of the saddle. Meanwhile, Jaime Torres on Seize the Gray is just relaxing up front on the lead with a 70-1 shot chasing.
Yeah, it's just a perfect trip for Seize the Gray here. He does tend to run his best races when he's on the front end. And not only does he make the front end here against, let's be honest, I mean, this was an interesting race to look at overall, but it's a little bit of a suspect field behind him. And he is in complete control up the backstretch, unchallenged, Dan. And they're going to start chasing him here around the second turn. But this horse has plenty left in the
They go
tank.
49-1. It's a huge advantage for Seize the Gray. You saw Florent Giroux on Dragoon Guard tried to sneak up along the inside. He sensed that the pace was slow, but Dragoon Guard still needs to prove, in my opinion, that he wants to pass horses, and he couldn't go when Seize the Gray stepped on the accelerator. Here comes Stronghold, who had to break from a far outside post and chased outside. It looks like he's got all the momentum, and I guess if you're taking book right here, you're all over Stronghold.
Yeah, he makes a nice little run here up the challenge, and he does get to even terms. Right now, he is right alongside Seize the Gray. He's got every chance to win this race, Dan. And you know what? The final 1/8 of a mile, he's just no match. And he gets a little bit leg weary here at the end. Seize the Gray kicks on with it. Stronghold will just hold on for a second here. Just a really easy trip for Seize the Gray, and he took advantage of it.
He was able to really sprint home despite drifting out in the stretch. It was a beautiful ride by Torres over Seize the Gray, who asserted his class and his affinity for the 1 1/8 distance. Just he likes it, I think, a little bit more than Stronghold. Let's start with Stronghold. This was a good effort from him, and he's always been an okay 3-year-old. He won the Santa Anita Derby. He didn't particularly won badly in the Kentucky Derby because he was part of that very fast pace before tiring. And after chasing Dragoon Guard in his prep, he ran fine here. It looks like the connections are going to turn him back to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. That distance should help him. We'll see how he handles tough older horses.
Yeah, ultimately, he's just, and maybe the distance had a little something to do with it, although you pointed out that he did win the Santa Anita Derby earlier this year, over 9 furlongs, Dan. Ultimately, he's just a horse who's got to run faster. He's got to find a way to run a faster race going forward. He ran fine in here. He never got to save any ground. 3-4 wide all the way around the track. The pace was not there for him to really attack. He ran really well in here. He was second best.
Dragoon Guard, I still think the jury's out as to how good he is. I'm not willing to give up on him as a nice 4-year-old next year. He was able to save ground after that awkward break. He still is at his best probably when he makes the lead, but it's not like he was quitting. All in all, the trip was decent from him from Giroux after the bad start, and he was punching on just to miss rallying for second.
Yeah, he was, to me, he was one of the horses in here who had maybe the most to prove. Maybe the sort of co-5-2 favorites in this race, Dan, had the most to prove on the way in here. I'm not sure necessarily either one of them came through with flying colors in this race. I mean, Dragoon Guard, listen, maybe his best races just come when he's able to make the lead, and he didn't make the lead here. But after that, I thought Florent Giroux got this horse into a good spot. He was in behind the winner on the lead for most of this trip. When Giroux was asking him to go challenge around the second turn, he really couldn't make up any ground, and he never looked like he was going to win through the stretch. I thought he was a very tame third in this race.
As for Unmatched Wisdom, the Chad Brown trainee, he never really got on track in the Travers. His prior start after winning, I believe, was the first 3 starts in his career, pretty impressively. Just never got forward as we expected him to. In this race, Pratt did get him forward. He was tracking 3 wide. The rails seemed to be okay at Parx, but Unmatched Wisdom just didn't seem to have any response when Stronghold came up alongside him on the second turn.
Yeah, he wasn't any good in this race. He was terrible in the Travers, but that one was a lot easier to forgive against that kind of a field. And he ultimately did not run much better in this race because he got up close. He was chasing the winner around the second turn, clear in second, and he just couldn't make any ground, never made a race of this thing, got tired through the stretch. This was a real step in the wrong direction for this horse.
It was a nice performance for Butch Reed's Uncle Heavy, a good bounce-back effort over his home track at Parx. He was 36-1. He was off of the pace. He was wide most of the way, and I think he did his absolute best here to finish fourth. He probably needs a little bit of class relief, and if I know Butch, he'll find the right spot next time.
I'm going to agree with all that stuff. He's a really nice horse. He tried really hard in here. Bumped at the start, like Stronghold. He was wide all the way around the track, and he just couldn't really get involved. But man, did he run his guts out in here and finish a good fourth.
I thought the New York bred Doc Sullivan also did his very best and actually ran an underrated sixth, considering he was so far back in the early stages of this race, and considering the fractions and the quality of competition, the fact that he passed 5 of them, it's a pretty good sign for his future down the road. He's a New York bred with a lot of potential, maybe next year's Empire Classic.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that, Dan. I mean, first of all, I don't know what the plan was here from Jose Ortiz to let this horse get outrun to last in here, because he's not a slow horse early. So there to me, and he broke from the gate fine. To me, there was no reason for this horse to be last. And then I guess Ortiz just wanted to come in out to the stretch there, but he couldn't get out into the clear. So he just sort of spends the entire stretch run between horses trying to rally. I'm with you. This is an underrated performance for an underrated horse. This horse is pretty good.
Any other trips in here that you saw that might point out one of these horses down the road against lesser competition? Timeout and Protective were a bit disappointing, in my opinion.
Yeah, Timeout I didn't think ran well at all, nor did Protective. I guess, I mean, the sort of obvious trip in the race would be Who's the King, who just never settled. He was very rank and just pulling. I mean, nothing really worked out for that horse, but, you know, the question surrounding him is, you know, how good is he anyways? Is he really a stakes horse?
Let's take a closer look at Seize the Gray, the Preakness winner, the Pennsylvania Derby winner. Remember, he won the Pat Day Mile earlier this year. It's been a sensational campaign for Wayne Lucas, who is ageless and has gotten Seize the Gray good at the right times. Seize the Gray now has his choice. The Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, as I mentioned, he won the Pat Day Mile. A 2-turn mile at Del Mar should be well within his scope. Or, of course, they could go on to the Breeders' Cup Classic. He earned a 97 buyer in the Pennsylvania Derby, the second highest buyer in his career, behind the 100 he earned in the Preakness.
Yeah, his two major wins both have something in common, Dan. He got really soft trips on the lead in both the Preakness and this Pennsylvania Derby. But that being said, the Pat Day Mile was a different story because that was a really fast pace that he kept within range and still won. This horse is pretty good. I would like to see them go in the Dirt Mile rather than the Classic, but you know, listen, if they take their shot in the Classic, it's not like he's going to be facing a bunch of, you know, killers in that race.
Almost $2.5 million in the bank for Seize the Gray, who went off a fairly generous price for a Classic winner. As we take a look at the payouts for the Pennsylvania Derby, Seize the Gray returns $10.60. Stronghold had a big look at it, turning for home, and was turned away. He ran a gallant second. Dragoon Guard, a ground-saving third. Seize the Gray has his choice. It's either going to be the Dirt Mile or the Classic.